the conference up in Sedona.
Yep. And Don was one of the presenters there, and he had some of the most amazing photos and all a bunch of new things that I hadn't known about, but had sort of had things alluded to before. And I was so excited, so I went up and met him. And then he was leading a group to go out in the desert to see if we could make contact with some of the spaceships and ETs that appear to be flying around there. And even though weather came in, so it wasn't very long, but we actually were signaling some folks, and then they were signaling back, and it was really obvious that they were responding to signals on our end. And that started us talking, and ever since then we've been friends. And at one point, since he is a pilot, he actually went to China, and he brought me my gong and a couple of other things. And so we've been connected for a whole while, so I'm really grateful he's here today. And that we're able to do this because he's leaving tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I thank you all for coming, and here's Don.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the world in little bits and pieces, short layovers, and I'm an airline pilot, so you get anywhere from 12 to 30 hours at a place, and then you're gone to the next place. So anyway, any of you, how many of you have seen a UFO? Several? Okay. Any of you had contact with any of the peoples? Good. Great. Okay, well, in the U.S., a lot of people are afraid to say that. There's quite the ridicule factor for the UFO subject, but I've been working hard to change that. So let me get this fired up.
Now come forward so you can see well. There's room on the couch here. Oh, oh, you can't. Okay, all right.
Thought I had one for.
Should I turn the overhead light off? Seems like we should do that.
Figure out her computer here. Thought I had one for San Jose.
Might be into your computer then.
Well, I'll just use this one. It's probably on my computer, and I didn't get the latest variation on here, but that'll work.
Okay.
And slideshow, I believe it is. Begin. There we go. Okay. So, starting back in 1999, I went on my first field outing with Dr. Stephen Greer and the Sea-Setting Group. And the very first night in the field, we had an amazing experience. And over the years, it's just built on itself, and it's resulted, it's been quite a spiritual journey more than anything, learning to become a cosmic citizen. So that's what my book is about, is the whole journey, and it leads you on the process. It gives you exercises and thought experiments to practice for yourself to work towards becoming a cosmic citizen.
Excuse me, maybe you can talk a little louder, please?
Okay, I'll try. I'm generally kind of soft-spoken, but so we're going to talk about ET contact, spiritual growth, and your ascension process. Now, how many of you have heard the term ascension, that we're going through an ascension process? Okay. There's probably as many definitions as hands went up as to what ascension means. My understanding is that we're raising ourselves to a higher consciousness, a higher vibratory frequency, to where we kind of shift into the next octave, less physical, more energetic, but also it relates to the type of thinking. Like third dimensional thinking is fear-based, adversarial. Fifth dimensional thinking is unconditional love and oneness. So we're raising ourselves up to that higher way of thinking, and in the process we're raising our vibrations. So we're going to talk about how these are all connected, and you'll understand the significance of that picture here shortly. Okay, so do you guys have any ideas what the common denominator is between spiritual growth, extraterrestrial contact, and ascension? Do you understand? Do you have an idea how they might all be related?
Contact.
Okay, contact. How is it related to spiritual growth?
Because they teach us.
Okay, very good. That's one. There's a number of things. This was taken near Denver, the west side of Denver, near the foothills, and I actually live up in the foothills up in this area. So I'm way beyond needing to be convinced that UFOs are real. I've seen so many, I've run out of fingers and toes to count them. We've interacted with some, we've flashed lights out and they flash back. So we'll just start with the assumption that UFOs are real. Any questions? Okay, so we got that out of the way. We don't need to prove it to anybody. However, a large number of what people see, probably half of what people see, are actually ours. This is this is called the Lockheed Flux Liner, and it was flying back in the 1960s. One of Dr. Greer's witnesses got a photo of this thing flying, 30,000 feet, and it was a nice clear photo, and he says, boy, I got this really good photo of a UFO. And they looked at it, and they looked at the blueprint that some of our other witnesses had seen of this thing, which is, well, it's made by Lockheed. These are highly charged capacitor plates. This is a chamber with spinning mercury in it. The ancient Vedic texts talk about the Behemanas, the flying craft that had spinning mercury as part of the power source, and maybe part of the anti-gravity. But I noticed back when I was a little kid, when the dentist would take an x-ray, the x-ray machine would go bleep and move just a little bit. The new ones don't do that near as much because they're much lower power. But I asked the dentist, why does the x-ray machine move when you take a picture? And he didn't know. Well, I found out that back in the 40s, before I was born, a guy by the name of T. Townsend Brown had discovered that highly charged capacitors tend to move towards the positively charged plate. So he started experimenting with little discs, and he had them on like a horse trainer with a slip ring to get power to it. And he'd charge these capacitors and they'd just go spinning around and around at like 300 miles an hour. And once he started to have success with it, it was being written up in like the Popular Mechanics and stuff at the time. But once he started to have success, the Navy came in and it all went quiet. And they even went into the libraries and pulled the back issues of magazines just to cover it up. But what they did is they have a number of segments of the capacitors here, and then by using the control stick, they can vary a little more voltage to this side, a little less to this side. They'll make it tilt. So kind of like a helicopter, they can control it by changing the relative voltage on the different plates. And the pilot sits up here. These are cameras. And so the pilot's wearing like goggles, and whichever way he's looking, he's getting binocular vision to see in that direction. This is actually a very primitive one of our flying craft. They've got much more advanced ones nowadays. Oxygen tanks down here, kind of a grappling hook to pick up samples. Okay, let's see if I can get this to run. And I don't know if we're going to get any sound on this.
I don't get much volume on my Toshiba, if that's what you mean. So sometimes I do.
Okay, this is time-lapse photography from the space shuttle. See if you can recognize some of the landmarks as they go over, but this is how fast we should be traveling nowadays. This is actually speeded up but from what
Why don't
the
you tell
shuttle.
us the landmarks, because
Yeah, well, that's the West Coast, LA.
wow.
Oh wait, that maybe that's. Oh, Denver, right? Might have been. volume's all the way up, so we're not gonna get any. That's the Nile, Cairo,
Ah.
Mediterranean area. And you'll see some thunderstorms from overhead.
An aurora borealis.
Is this as loud as this thing gets, Carol?
Yeah, I think it's all the way up.
You
I'll
can
shut
check
this
there.
in case it makes a difference.
It's funny, it should be
it's all the
another
way
end.
up. So we got one other thing coming up that you're not gonna be able to hear, but I can point you to YouTube and you can find it yourself. I've flown over the North Pole. We used to, when I was flying with 777, we'd go out of Chicago or Washington DC and we'd go over the top, the North Pole down through Siberia and into China. And you'd see those aurora borealis. It was like a shimmering curtain, like Virga, you know, the rain comes part way down. And we'd fly right under it, and I'm going, man, that's really pretty, but I'm getting nuked right about now.
This is what you see from the airplane?
Well, we were flying under it. This is on the shuttle, they're going over it.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean you're getting nuked about?
Cosmic radiation. There's the Nile again. I think that was Italy. So I see the world from 30 to 40,000 feet. Still not quite high enough to see the curvature of the Earth yet. Yeah, that's Italy. But we should all have our lone little anti-gravity sportabouts right now and be able to go anywhere in the world in an hour or so.
Anti-gravity what?
Sportabout, little sports car.
Oh.
You're saying, of course, the technology exists.
The technology exists.
Wow. Yeah, like they did in India, those
Oh, what is that? I don't know.
machines they had.
So, but can you imagine what it would do to the governments of the world if we were able to, say I've got a friend in Perth, Australia. If I could just pop down there and have dinner or something and pop home, would I bother to go to the airport and clear customs and then go to her house, or would I just go straight to her house? Governments would lose their relevance, wouldn't they? Yeah, so, friend of mine, who you'll hear more about later, recommended this book, and you can find it online, it's free, and there's a wide variety of different versions of it, but probably look for the most recent one. Robert Morningsky was a Native American Indian who, his grandfather had rescued an extraterrestrial who I guess had been shot down, and they nursed him back to health and hid him, kept him safe. And he told them, using it was like a crystal projector, projecting like a holographic image. He told them the story of our universe and our planet and how, the history of our planet. And so, this crystal projector kind of reminds me of the original Star Wars. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. A lot of the technology you see in those movies is actually real. Stargate, got a friend who uses them.
They say that the crystal skulls have that information too.
Probably,
And
yeah, stored in the crystals. So, I have a hard time reading this from this angle because there's so many wrinkles in there. But according to the Terra papers, others have been here long before us, that there was a battle, basically destroyed the planet, and so another group came in and, let's see, I forget which group they were. Bektai who was one of the rulers in the galaxy, sent his, Bektai was the ET that they nursed back to health. King An sent his Prince Ia and daughter Princess Ninhag, her son, who were both genetic scientists, to rebuild the destroyed planet Iridu, or Earth. And so they came in and kind of bioengineered and got it back to where it would support life, and repopulated it with plants, animals, peoples. Now, Prince Ia got in a little bit of a conflict, and so in order to get even, these people that he was genetically engineering, he used some of his own royal blood, plus he got royal blood donated from a number of different species. So there's like 5 or 6 different species of royal blood that were kind of mixed together to help create us. And so part of the experiment is to try and combine the best of the best.
What made them real? I mean, what made them royal?
Apparently,
what in that classification?
apparently in some kind of parts of the galaxy, royalty has pretty high standing. So they were kind of the ruling families of different worlds, different civilizations. And so they gave the best of their genetic material to us, create an experiment. So that gives us special abilities, which are kind of culturally suppressed, the extrasensory perception, telepathy, etc. We all have it, but in childhood it kind of gets beat out of you. Oh, stop talking about that imaginary friend, those don't exist. And you know, you can't really know what your sister's thinking or something. Well, yeah, you can. And so if it wasn't culturally suppressed, then we would develop those abilities more easily. So it gives us also, in addition to special abilities, it gives us royal standing, which creates some interesting paradigms here in the galaxy. So, you know, I had my sightings with the UFOs the first time out with Dr. Greer. The very first night we had this thing come streaking in the southwest, and it caught my eye because it wasn't quite like a meteor. It was more of an energy streak with a short plasma tail behind it. It wasn't like a meteor with chunks breaking off and anything like that. Stopped instantly, just boom, stopped. Big blue white light, bigger and brighter than Venus, just instantly. And I said, that's no meteor. Dr. Greer went flash, flash, and it went flash, flash. I said, cool. And so somebody else picked up a 1,000,000 candle power spotlight. Flash, 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 flash. So we do the same thing as pilots at night. We're flying, we see another airplane. We'll flash our landing light at them. And if they flash back, it's kind of like just saying hi.
Yeah.
But also we know that they see us, we see them, we know that we're watching each other. So it's just a subtle nonverbal communication. Well, we flashed a light at this UFO, and it flashed back. It's cool. You know, so I knew that we had established a rudimentary form of communication. So I was just about to suggest that we try a number sequence, like a prime number sequence. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Okay, so when we get to the point where it becomes obvious what the sequence was, then wait and see if they would do the next one, and then we do the next one. If we could alternate numbers up the prime number scale for a little ways, that would definitely prove higher intelligence. But before I could even suggest that, this spotlight came down out of the craft. And we don't know how far away this thing is. It's a bright light in the night sky. It's impossible to judge distance. We're guessing anywhere from 2 to 20 miles away. But this spotlight came down, and there were 18 of us, about as many as we got in the room, and it was probably about a 40-foot circle right on our group. And it was pale blue white, about the color of faded blue jean material, about the color of the light blue in his shirt. Not real bright, it wasn't painfully bright or anything, but it was bright enough that everybody could see the circle on the ground. And then about half of us could see the scan line go through it. How many of you watch Star Trek? You know, when the bridge gets scanned, you know, some other craft is scanning them, and this red scan line goes through the bridge. Well, this was blue, but it was close enough. Going, cool, we've just been scanned, it was so obvious. And then the light beam retracted back into the craft. It didn't shut off like when we turn off a searchlight or something. It got shorter. I have no idea how they did this. Wow.
What happened with the scanning? What was the thing that actually
Well,
happened?
they were probably scanning our consciousness to see how developed we were, whether we were ready to connect, etc. So, you know, that night it was kind of hard to get to sleep because the BBs were just kind of bouncing around in my head, going, wow, did we really just see that? And
Little competition.
dang airplanes, they make so much noise. Like I said, we should be all have our silent anti-gravity
That's
crap by
right.
now.
Yeah,
It ticks me off. I'm flying, you know, some of the newest airplanes out there, and yet it's
not so.
old technology compared to what we should have. So anyway, the next couple of days, I'm seeing very subtle humanoid energy form shapes. It's like thousands of little scintillating blue-white firefly lights, but in a humanoid shape around the group. And I'm going, am I really seeing that, or am I deluding myself? And other people were seeing them. And then about the third day down there, everybody was going to one of the energy healers, one of the healers in the Crestone area, near Crestone, Colorado. It's San Luis Valley near Mount Blanca, Alamosa, that area. And they said, oh, you should go see Donna, you know, get a healing. And I said, well, I'm down here trying all kinds of new stuff, I might as well give it a try. So I went, and she and her daughter worked on me for about 2 hours, and they had these huge crystal singing bowls. And when they got the two of them going together, they were like two different notes, harmonics, and it vibrated every cell in my body. I could feel it all the way to my core. I told her I'd never done anything like that before, but I said, just kind of tune me up and free up any blockages I might have so I can more accurately perceive what's really going on. So the next night we're out in the field, and there's these, you know, I'm seeing them much more clearly, these energy form humanoid beings just off to the side of our circle, and Dr. Greer's talking. He took a breath, which is rare for him. I said, Steve, do you see what I see? And he says, oh yeah, I've been watching them for a while. I said, okay. So we all got up and walked over to that side, and there seemed to be one of them paired up with each one of us. I'm probably getting ahead of myself. I've got some slides probably coming up, but I'll skip through them when we get there. So there's one that seemed to be paired up with me, standing about 5 feet in front of me. It was about 5 feet tall. The head was slightly pointy chin, but not like the classic gray that you see in the pictures. Eyes were kind of almond-shaped, little oriental, not the big bug-eye things that you generally see, which, by the way, Dr. Greer says those are lenses. They're kind of a combination sunglass slant night vision, so that you can see in a wide range of lighting conditions, but they're just a lens that they stick over their eye. That's not their real eye. The nose and mouth were similar to ours, but a little smaller proportionally. They weren't just the slits like you see in some of the pictures. And the neck was maybe about as big as my wrist, not all that big. The upper chest was about as far down as I could really see much detail. Kind of reminded me of a chimpanzee, kind of lean and wiry. And I'm going, okay, well, we're supposed to be ambassadors to the universe. That's part of what Dr. Greer's trainings were about, was to become a citizen ambassador to our star cousins. And so okay, well, I'll give this a try. So I just thought projected rather than speaking out loud, because if everybody was talking, it'd be just a jumble. So I just kind of thought projected who I was and what we were trying to do. And then I went receptive to see what kind of a message I get. And what I got, I expected like a voice in the middle of my head giving me a few words, a sentence or two, some kind of a verbal message in the middle of my head. Instead, what I got was two very powerful, very distinct emotions: unconditional love and intense gratitude. I'm going, whoa, that was so different from what I expected, and such a different format from what I expected that, you know, once again, it was hard to sleep that night. The babies were bouncing around and stuff, but the more I thought about it, it was not the message I expected. And it's not the format I expected. I think it was a very real experience. It wasn't just my subconscious coming through and telling me what I expected to hear. So
How beautiful.
that was, and then later I got what felt like a roundup, just boom, boom, just a big data dump. And I'm going, I didn't get any of that on the way in. I'm assuming it'll come out at the appropriate times. And a year or two later, went to a place where it was kind of open mic night. People were doing their songs and poems and stuff. And the guy wrote a poem called Star Child, and it just triggered something in me. And I started grabbing napkins and writing a poem down. And I hadn't written poetry in probably 20 or 30 years. Just started writing this stuff down almost faster than I could write. It was just flooding in. And going back to the hotel, more were coming in. I'm trying to remember them, so I'd write on the notepad and then start to fall asleep, and another one or two would come in. Okay, turn the light on, write it down. Okay, now try and go to sleep, because I knew if I tried to remember it and fell asleep, I'd forget it. Or I'd be sitting there worried about forgetting it, and I wouldn't go to sleep. So turn the light on, write it down. Well, by the next morning, my first poem, which is called Friends in High Places, was practically complete. I just had to polish up the meter and tempo a little bit. But,
And that's in the book?
yeah, it's in the book, yeah. So I think that's one way they communicate. I think that was part of that data dump that started coming out at the appropriate time. So this part is meeting our galactic neighbors, my journey from curious to confidant. And that's not a typo. So what do we need to do in order to make contact? I'm going to get over here where I can see just a little better. Am I blocking anybody?
Well,
I'll get back here. So, what do we need to do? What's most important? We need to meet them halfway. Most of these.
Little competition. It's so rare we have planes coming over. I think they're just showing us something. I don't know
It's
what.
very windy out there today.
Yeah, when the winds change, that's the only time we hear
Oh, you think
planes.
well, it was coming strong out of the east.
Was it?
Yeah, it was 30 knots out of the east when we landed.
It still is, it's really unusual for the planes to come over.
Okay, so most of the visitors are higher dimensional, fifth dimension, which means they're vibrating at a higher frequency. Now, one way to think of that is, say you've got a fan. When it's stopped, you can see the fan blades, but you plug it in, it starts going faster and faster. It reaches a frequency where you can no longer see the physical fan blades. Now, you know enough to hopefully not stick your finger in there to test it, but when it vibrates at a higher frequency, it becomes functionally invisible to us. So what you need to do is raise your vibrations up to a level where you can meet them halfway. They can come down somewhat, but it's uncomfortable for them to come all the way into the third dimension with all of the fear and hate and the lower emotions. So what you need to do is raise your emotions up to have a level of unconditional love for them and understanding that we are all one. We'll get into that. A lot of it involves self-analysis, introspection, mental discipline, and that's been part of the journey, and that's a lot of that is in the book where I work you through some exercises to help develop your thinking. For example, one little exercise is when you meet somebody and you get a first impression, think about what your first impression is. Is it fair, or is there some stereotype or preconception that's getting in the way? Do you think, I'm afraid of that person because they're a different ethnicity than me, or do you understand that we're all part of the same creation? And so if you find yourself with a stereotype that's an unfair first impression, go back and say, okay, reset, give them a fair chance. I always give everybody a fair chance, the benefit of the doubt until they prove me wrong is kind of the way I approach meeting new people, rather than having a fear until I learn that they're okay. I just give everybody the benefit of the doubt until they, unless they prove me wrong. How many are familiar with the law of attraction? Okay. What you put out is what you get back. So if you fear, if you're afraid there's dragons around every corner, well, guess what? You're gonna run into dragons. But if you put out unconditional love and a sense of oneness with everybody in the universe, that's what you get back. So it's important to frame our thoughts correctly so you don't create unpleasant situations that you fear. Mother Teresa was asked to march in an anti-war parade. And she said no. And they said, but why would you not participate in such a worthy cause? She said, when you give a march for peace, I'll lead it. Subtle, but very, very important difference. Focus your thoughts on what you want to create, not on what you fear. Okay? Also, your mind is a very poor firewall. What you expose yourself to gets into your subconscious, whether you think you can filter it out or not. So if you watch, violent movies and TV shows or whatever, or the violent video games, it affects you even if you think, oh, I can keep that separate from the rest of my life. It does affect you. So I hardly watch any TV anymore. It's just a cultural wasteland most of the time. So, if you see something that's just violent, brutal, whatever, just don't even pollute your brain with it anymore. Just turn it off, change channel, walk away, whatever. You'll find life is a lot better. Let's see. How you frame things is important. You may not get this down here as much. We've got a news station, quote news station, it's actually a propaganda station up in the U.S. That it's fear all the time. And they're trying to keep people in fear because then they can be manipulated. They manipulate you through fear. And so WTF News, we televise fear. It's actually Fox News, but the way they frame it is very important. And if you see that somebody's trying to manipulate you with fear, just recognize what it is and refuse to play their game. So I'm not going there, I'll go work on something positive. Bye. You can change that paradigm. So, love is the answer. In order to resonate on the fifth or at least the fourth dimensional level. Yes.
I'm here talking about ascension.
Yes.
And are we talking about a group, like we're advancing as a group, or are we talking that some of us are actually ascending individually?
It's a process, and people are at different levels along that process. Some people are reaching that level, some are moving on, some are staying to help others. But we're building more and more people that are thinking in the higher dimensional ways. And so we're going to reach critical mass on this planet pretty soon where more than half of the people are thinking unconditional love rather than fear. And it's going to create a paradigm shift that's going to bring everybody else along pretty rapidly. So individuals are at different levels. They're all climbing the same mountain. They may be coming up different paths, and some are up here and some are down here, but everybody's where they should be. Everybody's advancing, and most everybody. And we're going to shift into a higher dimension to where the people that are stuck in the violence and the fear and the war and all that stuff, they're not even going to be able to affect us anymore because they're just not even going to be in the same dimension.
I have a short comment. That's one thing I learned to test with the pendulum. And if I test our average level of consciousness, it's been just going up slowly but gradually, higher and higher. Here we go. And of course, individuals also. It's interesting to actually put numbers to it. It's happening.
Yeah. 12, 12, 12, everybody thought it's going to be like a light switch, boom, we're going to be in the fifth dimension just instantly. Or, 3 days of storms and wind and stuff, and then it'll be in the new dimension. It didn't happen. A lot of people were disappointed, said, what happened? We were misled or whatever. Well, no, it's a process. It's a gradual process, and maybe it's just the law of attraction, what I'm putting out, but see more and more people that are becoming spiritually aware and more conscious, so, you know, my experience is not a total survey of the world's population, but it seems like you've got a different way to tap into the world's population, and you're seeing the general rise too, so
Yeah.
that kind of complements it. So, it's also important to have an understanding of the oneness or interconnectedness of all of us. So, love everyone like you love your kids or like your puppy dog loves you, unconditionally. Understand we're all extensions of the same source. We're all created by the same creator. We're all sparked by the same seed of consciousness from the same creator. We're all awake and aware and conscious in the same way. So, in that respect, we are all much more interconnected than we realize. This separation is pretty much an illusion of the third dimension. Also, people who annoy you are actually reflecting back something about yourself that you may not be real comfortable with, but you're not maybe recognizing on a conscious level yet. So take that annoyance as a lesson, that they're a teacher, they're here to teach you something. Figure out what it is and work on yourself. And you can progress. It's called, part of that is called the dark night of the soul. Anybody who's on a spiritual journey will experience the dark night of the soul. That's where you start to realize where you should be and see where you were at, and you go, how in the world am I going to get there? And it just seems pretty overwhelming about how you're going to change yourself. And then as you work your way through that dark night of the soul and cast off what they call, it's spiritual alchemy. You're casting off the dross, the impurities of the old self, and purifying your spirit, the way you think. And then you become much more, you'll like yourself a whole lot better on the other side. It can be difficult going through the process, and if you're going through that process, find somebody who can help and support you, somebody who's been through it before. Most anybody that's been on the spiritual path for a while has been through it. We did an experiment. I'm a Rosicrucian mystic, and in one of our convocations we did an experiment where we got two people into the sanctum of the temple, facing each other.